Have you ever wondered how fate can bring two strangers together in the midst of a raging snowstorm? In today's riveting tale, a newly widowed mother and her fragile newborn child face impossible odds when their carriage breaks down in the harsh winter of 1880s Wyoming. Just when all hope seems lost, a wealthy but solitary rancher appears out of the swirling blizzard and changes their lives forever. Will these two souls haunted by past sorrows find new purpose and a shared future on that remote storm-swept ranch? Join us as we journey through this heartwarming and suspenseful story. Be sure to listen all the way to the end to discover how courage, faith, and love triumph over the cruelest of winters. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on more incredible stories just like this one. A howling wind swept across the rolling expanse of Wyoming territory in 1885, its voice echoing the bitter chill that promised a brutal storm. In the midst of this gathering tempest, Lydia Farnsworth huddled inside a broken-down carriage, arms trembling around her week-old infant, Marigold. The thick blanket wrapped around the baby offered precious little protection against the cold that seemed to seep in through every crack in the carriage walls. Lydia felt her lips numb, and every labored breath she took formed a faint cloud in the icy air. Her thoughts raced back to only 9 days earlier, when she had still been in the small town where her husband Elliot had passed away so suddenly. The doctors had tried to save him after Marigold's difficult birth, but his heart had given out from exhaustion. That tragedy still weighed on Lydia's mind, a heavy burden that left her unsure of what came next. With no relatives nearby and only a distant sister, Harriet, in Montana Territory, Lydia had convinced herself that traveling there was her only option. But now in this remote and frozen wilderness, she found herself wondering if this decision might prove her undoing. The driver of the carriage, a stooped middle-aged man named Mr. Sears, had walked off some hours earlier to find help, leaving Lydia behind with Marigold. He had insisted that he alone should brave the storm, promising he'd bring back a rescue party. Their horses had panicked in a deep snowdrift, snapping the harnesses and galloping off into the white void. With one final worried glance, Mr. Sears had trudged away, disappearing into swirling flurries. The memory of his figure vanishing into the whiteout left Lydia fighting a sense of deep dread. No matter how he tried, could he really get help before it was too late? Pressing her thin gloves to her face, Lydia breathed into them, trying to warm her numb fingertips. Marigold let out a thin wail, her hunger and discomfort all too obvious in the cramped freezing compartment. Lydia's heart twisted at the sound. "Shh, darling," she whispered hoarsely, carefully unbuttoning her threadbare coat so she could cradle her infant daughter closer. She shared what body heat she had left, humming a faint lullaby. Elliot used to sing whenever he had a moment between calls to visit sick townsfolk. Her late husband had been a traveling doctor ever devoted to his patients. It felt unfair that when it was his own family in jeopardy, fate had taken him so swiftly. Outside the carriage window, the last pale light of day was quickly fading, the wind picking up intensity. If help did not arrive soon, Lydia knew she and Marigold would have little chance of surviving until morning. The cold was merciless, creeping steadily through every layer of clothing. She silently prayed that Mr. Sears had found a ranch or outpost, anyone who could help. In the fleeting silence between gusts of wind, Lydia picked up the small compass Elliot had given her before they'd begun this journey. Its pearl handle was chipped, but still she rubbed her thumb over it for comfort. "Just a little longer," she whispered, casting a fearful glance toward the storm. "Please let us hold on a little longer." An eerie, whistling chorus arose as night descended fully. Lydia realized she had to move, had to do something to keep from surrendering to the drifting waves of unconsciousness, beckoning her. She forced herself to shuffle in place, shifting Marigold's position now and then, all to generate even a spark of warmth. Yet her body grew heavier with each passing minute, and the dark was settling in with no sign of rescue. Then faintly she heard a noise outside, the howling wind, a distant pounding that grew incrementally louder, as though a large animal or a rider were approaching through the blizzard. Lydia froze, uncertain whether she was imagining it, but the rhythmic crunch became too distinct to be a trick of her delirium. A pulse of cautious hope surged in her chest. Throwing the door open proved a struggle. Snow had piled outside, and the wind battered her face the moment she peeked out. A shape materialized in the swirling white, a massive horse straining against the storm, steam rising from its heaving flanks, and on its back a lone rider wearing a wide-brimmed hat, face muffled by a thick scarf. Lydia's breath hitched. Had Mr. Sears returned? Or was this someone else entirely, ma'am? The rider called out, voice barely audible above the wind's onslaught. "Are you all right in there?" Lydia almost laughed. Of course she was not all right, but at least someone had found her. Please, my baby, she's freezing. We need help, she managed to yell, her voice cracking. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his tall boots crunching through snowdrifts. I'm Graham Whitaker, he said, firmly dipping his head. His eyes visible above the scarf were dark with concern. Without hesitation, he slipped out of a heavy wool coat and draped it around Lydia's shoulders. We've got to get you both to warmth. My ranch is not too far from here. Lydia's relief was immediate, but tinged with anxiety. Could she trust a stranger? Yet in those few words and the simple act of offering his coat, she sensed a compassion that outweighed any fears. She nodded, hugging Marigold close. I'm Lydia Farnsworth, she whispered, and this is my daughter Marigold. Graham looked at the rickety, half-broken carriage. I'll send my hands out later to see if we can find your driver. But right now, we must get you two out of this storm. His strong arms slipped around Lydia's waist, supporting her as they made for the waiting horse. Marigold's cries rose in pitch as though spurred by the bitter winds. Lydia clutched her child desperately. Would they even survive the short ride? But as Graham helped her mount, his presence seemed to steady her. With the reins in one hand and Lydia secured in front of him, Graham urged his horse forward into the swirling darkness. Lydia held her baby tight, silently praying that the horse, the rider, and the grace of Providence would carry them all to safety. By the time they reached Graham's ranch, Lydia's senses felt faint and dreamlike. They rode across snowdrifts so deep the horse had to lift its hooves high, each step echoing in the wind. She lost all sense of direction, trusting solely in Graham's sure guidance. Twice, she nearly slid off the saddle from exhaustion, and both times his arm tightened around her in unwavering support. Whenever she drifted toward darkness, he would calmly command, "Stay with me, Lydia." Her baby Marigold had quieted into small whimpers more alarming than her cries. Lydia tried to hum a lullaby, lips fumbling over the melody. To keep herself conscious, she fixated on small details, the decorative carving on Graham's saddle horn, the swirl of frost clinging to the horse's mane, the measured cadence of the hooves trudging through the snow. At last, a glow flickered between the trees. Lydia blinked, certain her eyes were playing tricks, but the light grew brighter, revealing buildings, a barn, a home, and other small outbuildings. Graham guided the horse straight toward the largest structure. Relief flooded Lydia so intensely she nearly sobbed. She found enough strength to keep Marigold's face sheltered as the wind pelted them. One final time, they reached a large barn first. Graham dismounted gracefully, then helped Lydia down with surprising gentleness. Had she been stronger, she would have walked on her own, but her legs buckled the moment they touched the ground. Graham swept Lydia into his arms without hesitation, holding both mother and child safely. The barn's interior was blissfully warm and smelled comfortingly of hay. Graham placed Lydia on a bench by a stall while he spoke soft words of thanks to his horse, pulling off the saddle and rubbing the animal down. She watched him through half-lidded eyes, marveling at the competence in his every motion. He returned quickly to lift her again and carry her toward the nearby ranch house. Lydia's senses wavered. She registered only impressions, a stone hearth flickering firelight, the sudden enveloping warmth as Graham pushed open the front door. Darkness claimed her the moment they entered, and she felt herself laid gently on something soft, perhaps a chaise or daybed. She heard distantly the sound of logs crackling in a fireplace. With her last conscious thought, she clutched Marigold's tiny body and murmured a hoarse thank you, though she wasn't sure if the words ever left her lips. When Lydia regained awareness, she didn't know how much time had passed. A woven quilt tucked around her radiated pleasant warmth, and the old hearth was now a steady blaze heating the entire living space. Before she even opened her eyes fully, her first instinct was panic. Where was Marigold? Her eyes flew open to find Graham sitting in a nearby armchair, rocking a sleepy-eyed Marigold in his arms. The sight halted the frantic beat of her heart, replacing it with profound gratitude. Your daughter is safe, he said gently, meeting Lydia's gaze. Now so are you. The following morning, Lydia woke to the sound of soft humming. Her eyelids fluttered, and she found herself cocooned in layers of blankets on a comfortable settee near a large hand-hewn stone fireplace. The air smelled of bacon, eggs, and fresh bread, far more inviting than the bitter cold that still lingered in her bones. Slowly she sat up, muscles protesting the movement, yet she felt better rested than she had in weeks. Marigold's cradle, a dresser drawer, cleverly converted for the purpose, sat close to the hearth. Graham Whitaker knelt beside it, gently shushing the baby as he fed her with a small bottle. The tenderness in his posture startled Lydia. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, the archetype of a rugged frontiersman, yet he cradled her infant with the same care one might reserve for precious porcelain. "Good morning," he greeted softly, noticing her stir. "Hope you slept well." She was fussing a bit at sunrise, so I made do with goat's milk until we can get real supplies. Lydia rubbed her eyes, uncertain how to frame her gratitude. She managed to smile. "Thank you. It seems you've gone above and beyond for a complete stranger, Mr. Whitaker." He shrugged, setting the bottle aside. "Just Graham. Please, I figure this storm might keep us inside for a few days. No sense standing on formalities." Carefully, he settled Marigold, now dozing contentedly, back into her makeshift cradle. A sudden wave of concern seized Lydia. "Did you hear any word about Mr. Sears?" "Our driver?" she asked, remembering the weary old man who had gone seeking help. Graham nodded. "One of my ranch hands, Nate, rode out at first light. He found Mr. Sears at the Watson spread to the north. He's safe and sound, worried sick about you two, but unharmed. Seems he lost his way briefly but managed to reach shelter. Once the storm clears, we'll bring him back here or arrange for him to continue on." Relief coursed through Lydia. So Mr. Sears had survived, thank heavens. She took a moment to notice the ranch's interior: sturdy log walls, high-beam ceilings, modestly decorated, but with a homey warmth that spoke of care. A few embroidered cushions, dried flowers in clay vases, and a modest library on a handcrafted bookshelf. A woman's touch was clearly visible, prompting Lydia to wonder about Graham's family. Seeming to sense her question, he moved to stir a steaming pot on the stove. "I lived here with my late wife Felicity," he explained quietly. "She passed 5 years ago. I've kept the ranch going and ever since. It's a big place, but she had a way of making it feel comfortable, something I'm still trying to do." Lydia's chest tightened with empathy. She recognized the raw note of loss in his voice, so much like her own. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Elliot, my husband passed right after Marigold was born. I understand how it is when a piece of your life suddenly vanishes." Graham ladled soup into a clay bowl, offering it to her. "Seems we share an unfortunate bond," he said gently, then added with sincerity. "But we also share the gift of still being here, of still surviving. That counts for something." The soup's aroma wafted toward Lydia, and only then did she realize how famished she was. She accepted the bowl gratefully, using a thick cloth to protect her hands from the heat. She sipped once, letting the savory warmth fill her belly. For the first time since Elliot's death, she felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps the world held more than just hardship. In the days that followed, the storm raged outside, piling drifts of snow so high they half buried the fences. But within the walls of Graham's ranch house, a fragile peace blossomed. Lydia spent her days regaining strength and helping where she could, while Marigold quickly developed a fondness for the rancher who had become her unlikely protector. Every so often, Lydia would catch Graham smiling at the baby's coos or the way she grabbed his finger with surprising determination. When the winds calmed enough for him to venture out, Graham began showing Lydia around the place in slow, measured steps. The first time she stepped onto the porch, the crisp, icy air shocked her lungs, but she felt less fearful than she had before. "I've always been a city woman," she confessed, her breath billowing in white puffs. "Elliot's practice kept us in small towns most of the time, but we dreamed of a life somewhere quieter. A ranch was never really on my mind, though." Graham nodded. "Felicity was the dreamer for us. She wanted to raise horses. I focused on cattle at first. Then we met in the middle building, something that combined our passions." He paused, gesturing at the wide-open pasture. "All this land you see belonged to my father, who claimed it in the early days of settlement. Felicity and I expanded, planting gardens, building new barns. Each storm, each harvest season, we learned more about ourselves in this land. Their shared stories forged a gentle bond between them, grounded in an unspoken understanding of loss." Lydia still thought of Elliot often, especially late at night when Marigold stirred, demanding comfort. The memory of how tirelessly Elliot had worked to provide for them brought tears of both sorrow and pride. That same heartbreak was reflected in the way Graham sometimes gazed at Felicity's old possessions, her embroidery a delicate teacup on a shelf. Yet neither avoided the subject. Instead, they spoke about it openly, as if the ghosts of their loved ones deserved mention at the table of everyday life. One morning, a week after their first meeting, Lydia awoke early to find Graham rocking Marigold near the hearth. The baby was fussing, and Lydia recognized the early signs of a mild fever. Worry twisted in her gut, resurrecting memories of helplessness. But Graham's expression was calm, almost reassuring. "She's just a bit warm." I've had the doctor out here before for my ranch hands. He's a good man. Doc Weber. Already sent word. Meanwhile, I know a trick or two for bringing down a child's temperature. Working in tandem, Lydia and Graham bathed Marigold with tepid water, laid cool cloths on her brow, and coaxed small sips of water between bouts of fussing. By nightfall, her fever had ebbed, leaving both adults exhausted yet relieved. Lydia sank into a chair, cradling her sleeping daughter. Graham rested a broad hand on Lydia's shoulder, an unspoken assurance that he was there, sharing in every ounce of worry. In that moment, Lydia realized how remarkable it was to feel safe to let someone else share the burden that once felt like hers alone to bear. No longer mere strangers thrown together by a storm, they had begun forging a connection as deep and sustaining as the land itself. The storm that had nearly killed Lydia and Marigold slowly relinquished its hold on the territory, replaced by bright but cold days. With Graham's encouragement, Lydia ventured outdoors more often. Each step onto the porch, each short trek around the yard felt like a small victory. Sometimes she would carry Marigold in a sling Graham's late wife Felicity had made, repurposed from soft linen that smelled faintly of lavender. At other times, she would let Graham cradle the baby while she explored on her own, learning the ranch's nooks and crannies. "Don't push yourself too hard," Graham warned gently when he found her in the barn one day, cheeks flushed from effort. She was trying to help rub down the old mare he had once mentioned was Felicity's favorite. "You're only just regaining your strength." Lydia paused, brush in hand. "I've felt useless for so long," she admitted, voice quavering slightly. "When Elliot first passed, I became consumed by grief. Then fear took over, fear for Marigold, for the future. Doing these small tasks helps me feel alive again." Graham's expression softened. "I understand. After Felicity died, I thought burying myself in ranch work would lessen the pain. Some days it did, other days it didn't help at all. But eventually those tasks reminded me of the life we'd built, the hope we'd shared." He removed his gloves, moving closer to show Lydia how to brush the horse's flanks in slow, calming strokes. "Sometimes living is the best way to honor those we've lost." She absorbed his words with gratitude, each slow stroke of the brush feeling almost therapeutic. The old mare sniffed at Lydia's coat and snorted. Making her laugh, Graham offered her a small, rare smile in return. A few days later, Lydia mustered the courage to ride with Graham's guidance. Though the memory of that harrowing journey from the carriage was still fresh, she wanted to learn to handle a horse properly. Graham chose a gentle gelding named Patch for her first lesson. Under his watchful eye, she learned how to mount, how to hold the reins, and how to guide the horse with subtle shifts of her body. "Trust him," Graham coached as she wobbled at first. "If you stay calm, he'll do the same." Her initial fear gave way to a surprising exhilaration. Looking around, she realized how breathtaking the ranch was in the aftermath of the winter storm. Endless white plains under a big sky, the crisp air scented with pine and earth. Marigold, bundled up in a thick blanket, dozed in a makeshift crib near a barn window, watched over by one of Graham's ranch hands. It was a scene she never would have envisioned back in her old life. Now each evening brought new conversations. Around the warm glow of the fireplace, Lydia and Graham exchanged stories not just of sorrow, but of happiness too. Childhood memories, silly anecdotes about old neighbors. Lydia would share a sweet recollection of Elliot playing violin at small gatherings, while Graham described Felicity's fierce determination to turn the ranch into a horse training haven. With Marigold cooing or asleep nearby, these recollections felt like a bridge between past and present, forging a path toward a future neither had dared to consider before. Little by little, the Farnsworth widow and the solitary rancher discovered that their fractured hearts with patience could mend, and in the process might even learn to open again to the possibility of love. Winter's grip gradually loosened, giving way to the first hints of spring. Long icicles dripped from the eaves and the snow crust turned softer underfoot. Though the nights remained cold, the days were marked by a sun that lingered just a bit longer in the sky. With this shift in weather, Lydia found herself more integrated into daily ranch life. She cooked meals in the large, welcoming kitchen, tidied up around the homestead, and even helped plan chores. Graham's ranch hands, once reserved around her, soon discovered her gentle determination, respecting her for her willingness to pitch in. Marigold grew healthier by the day. Her little legs kicked wildly whenever Lydia spread out a blanket for her to lie on, and her face broke into big, toothless grins whenever Graham scooped her up. He took to calling her Little Golden Girl, a nickname that made the baby gurgle happily. Despite the slow thaw of the land, Lydia felt a warmth in her heart every time she saw the two of them together. It was as though a missing piece of the puzzle she called life had clicked into place. Yet there was a delicate uncertainty beneath it all, a question of what came next. Lydia's sister Harriet, far away in Montana Territory, had sent sporadic letters urging Lydia to hurry to her. Harriet's last letter spoke of practical matters, a local widower doctor living in comfortable circumstances who might be a good match for Lydia, and a proper father figure for Marigold. Reading that letter had left Lydia conflicted. Logically, Harriet made fair points, especially if Lydia wanted security for Marigold, but her heart tugged elsewhere, drawn to the kindness and steadfastness Graham offered daily without question. One afternoon, Graham found Lydia standing outside the barn, staring up at a small orchard of bare-limbed trees Felicity had planted. "Penny for your thoughts," he asked, leaning his shoulder against a beam. She sighed, hugging her arms. Harriet wrote again. "She's worried about me, worried about Marigold." Lydia paused, lips pressing into a thin line. "She thinks I'm alone out here, vulnerable. She'd probably faint if she knew how much this place actually feels like home." Graham nodded, gaze sweeping the horizon. "You're not the first person whose relatives find Wyoming too wild," he said quietly. "Felicity's own family in Ohio never truly approved of her coming out here. But this land called to her. She insisted we make our life in a place of wide skies and open possibility." Silence stretched between them for a moment, filled only by the distant sound of a horse nickering. Lydia studied Graham's profile, the lines etched by both the sun and sorrow. In his calm presence, she recognized the same quiet resilience she aspired to have. "I'm not alone," she stated with more conviction. "And even if Harriet doesn't understand, I know what's best for Marigold." Graham's eyes softened. He gently placed a hand on Lydia's arm. "That's all that matters in the end, making choices that let you both of you live fully." As the wind rustled the bare branches of the orchard, Lydia felt a flicker of clarity. She remembered the fierce protectiveness that had propelled her to leave everything behind after Elliot's death. In Graham, she saw someone who, despite his own pain, was equally protective and just as committed to living a decent, honorable life. Perhaps she realized the place she had initially seen as a mere stop on her journey to Harriet might just be her true destination after all. The day Lydia found a faded photograph tucked into an old ledger on Graham's desk, she understood more about the subtle echoes that haunted the ranch. The photo showed Felicity, eyes bright with laughter, standing beside a young sapling. The once slim trunk, Lydia realized, must be the mighty oak that now shaded one corner of the ranch yard. In the picture, Felicity seemed so full of life, her aspirations for this place shining through. That evening, Lydia and Graham sat near the hearth, Marigold asleep in the cradle, the flames flickering warmly. Lydia hesitated, the photograph resting on her lap. She didn't want to intrude on sacred memories, but she also wanted to know. "I found this in your ledger. You and Felicity planted that oak tree, didn't you?" she ventured softly. Graham's jaw tightened briefly. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Yes, we planted that tree in our first spring. She was certain it would watch over us for generations. Felicity believed the ranch would grow around that oak, that one day our children would climb its branches." He exhaled, casting a long look at Marigold's tiny form. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm betraying her by moving on, by even considering opening my heart again." Lydia's thoughts flew to Elliot, to the life they never got to share with Marigold. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. "I believe," she said, voice trembling, "only a little, that our loved ones want us to keep living, keep loving. If we find new joy, it doesn't erase what came before. It just expands our capacity to love, don't you think?" They sat in silence, the only sound the low crackle of the fire. After a moment, Graham reached out and Lydia took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but encompassed all the words neither could fully articulate. The tension in his eyes seethed slightly, as if her acceptance and understanding was a balm for a long, festering guilt. Before he could say anything further, a small whimper came from the cradle. Marigold stirred, fussing in her sleep. Lydia moved to scoop her up, but Graham was quicker, his reflexes honed by weeks of caring for the infant. Whenever Lydia was fatigued, he lifted Marigold against his shoulder, patting her back in gentle circles until she settled again. The sight melted Lydia's heart, as it always did. "Felicity taught me the lullaby. I used to hum for her," he said, rubbing Marigold's back. "I used to say it was wasted on me, a man with no children at the time. But Felicity had faith that it would be useful someday." He glanced at Lydia, a rueful tilt to his lips. Didn't realize how right she'd be, just not in the way she imagined. Lydia's throat tightened at his admission. She ran a hand over Marigold's downy hair. "Elliot always wanted to sing lullabies too," she whispered, leaning in so their foreheads almost touched. "He never got the chance, seeing you care for Marigold." It makes me think maybe I'm allowed to feel at peace about the life Elliot didn't get because someone else so worthy stepped in. In that moment, Lydia realized the flicker of possibility between them was not just fleeting attraction. It was a deeper bond built on shared mourning and newfound hope. Just as the oak tree stood tall, despite winter storms, perhaps love, this quiet, steadfast love, could endure in them as well. One crisp morning news finally came that Harriet intended to visit Lydia. Read her sister's letter with conflicting feelings. Harriet's tone was polite but carried an undertone of skepticism. Clearly, she wondered how Lydia could deem this rough country life a suitable environment for raising an infant, especially when a respectable doctor in her Montana town had expressed interest. Harriet's words struck the same chord, a persistent notion that Lydia was only passing time on a ranch, emotionally vulnerable and unprepared for real decisions. Setting the letter aside, Lydia looked across the front room where Graham was guiding Marigold's chubby hands over a carved wooden horse. "She's going to break your workshop if you're not careful," Lydia teased softly, drawing his attention. He laughed. "I'll just have to make her another. She can't break them all." His laughter died as he noticed the tension in Lydia's brow. "Something wrong? It's Harriet," Lydia said, handing him the letter. "She's coming to see for herself to judge whether I'm making a mistake. She keeps mentioning a Dr. Boyd in her town who's apparently well off, good with children and more. Appropriate, I suppose." Graham's lips thinned. He handed the letter back gently, then scooped up Marigold, lifting the baby high enough to elicit a squeal of glee. "I can't blame your sister for wanting the best for you. If she hasn't seen this place or how well you've adapted, maybe she's just worried. Still, a part of me bristles at being viewed as second best. I'm sure this Dr. Boyd is a fine man," but Lydia reached out, laying a hand on his arm. "You saved our lives, Graham. You sheltered us, taught me practical skills, and cared for Marigold as if she were your own. You're hardly second best." She felt her throat tighten. "I just want Harriet to see with her own eyes. I won't force her approval, but I also won't let her disapproval dictate what I do next." He relaxed, pressing a calloused palm gently to Lydia's cheek. Marigold in his other arm babbled happily. "You deserve to follow your heart," he murmured. "Whatever your sister thinks, I want you and Marigold to stay here. Make this your home, but it has to be your decision, not mine and not hers." Lydia closed her eyes, leaning her forehead briefly against his shoulder. How many times had she wished for Elliot's presence, for his reassurance? But now she felt a similar reassuring steadiness in Graham. She opened her eyes and looked at the homestead that had become her sanctuary, a place no longer foreign or lonely. "We'll show Harriet the truth," Lydia said firmly. "The ranch's life and warmth, how happy Marigold is. That's all the proof needed." Graham tilted his head in a subtle nod, stepping outside to check on chores while Lydia remained inside. Watching him through the window, she suddenly caught a glimpse of the future Harriet might witness, a man patiently teaching his adopted family how to thrive on this rugged land, a woman learning her own strengths day by day, and a child growing up with two parents who cherished her. It wasn't a life Harriet would have scripted, but it was theirs. And Lydia felt a certainty building within her, stronger than any storm, that she would not trade this new life, this new love, for any measure of comfort or status elsewhere. The mild days of spring brought a burst of fresh energy. Snow melted, revealing patches of green grass. Lydia, with Marigold strapped to her back, in Felicity's old sling, labored in the garden Graham had taught her to tend. She felt an unexpected thrill at seeing tiny buds poke through the cold ground. Each seedling was a promise of growth, sustenance, and renewal, mirroring her own journey since that fateful night of the blizzard. Mid-morning, Graham appeared with a determined look, carrying a small leather pouch. He set it down on a barrel and bent to examine a row of young sprouts. "Everything's coming along nicely," he remarked. Lydia nodded, smiling at his obvious pride. A quiet moment passed. Then Graham cleared his throat. "There's something I've been meaning to show you." Curious, Lydia followed his gaze to the pouch. Inside was a folded document. Graham handed it to her carefully, as though it were precious. "Go on," he urged. "Open it." Lydia unfolded it to see an official-looking land deed. Her eyes skimmed over the bold lettering until recognition set in the deed, named Lydia Farnsworth and Marigold Farnsworth alongside Graham Whitaker as joint owners of the ranch. A stunned gasp left her lips. What is this you're giving us? Part of your land?" Graham's dark eyes were steady. "Not part. The whole place is in our names, equally. I've drawn it up, so if something happens to me, you won't be left at anyone's mercy, no caretaker. No distant relative can uproot you. This ranch, our home, will be yours, and Marigold's free and clear." Tears burned at the corners of Lydia's eyes, her emotions spinning. Graham, that's enormous. Are you sure? He nodded, expression solemn and tender. All at once, I've never been more sure of anything. Lydia Marigold's as dear to me as if I'd fathered her myself. And you, I want you as my partner in every sense. If you'll have me. Reaching into his coat pocket, he produced a ring, simple gold but lovingly polished. Will you marry me? Let us finish what fate started that winter night. Build a family here together. Marigold, sensing the charged atmosphere, turned her head, eyes wide at the ring glinting in the sunlight. She babbled something that sounded suspiciously like "Papa." Lydia's heart nearly burst. She stared at Graham for a long moment, words catching in her throat. The memory of Elliot flickered in her mind, his sweet nature, his devotion. Yet this did not feel like betrayal. Her love for Elliot had shaped her, and now she had room to love again. "Oh, Graham," she finally managed, voice trembling. Yes, of course I'll marry you." His smile broke wide and unguarded, a joy that filled the space between them. He gently removed the sling from Lydia's shoulders so she could hold Marigold properly, then slipped the ring onto Lydia's finger. The reality of it all seemed to wash over her, each moment surreal. This ranch, this man, her child, in a life that beckoned with promise. They embraced Lydia's free arm around Graham's neck. Over her shoulder, the land deed rustled in the mild spring breeze. When they pulled apart, he cupped her face, brushing away tears. "I want to give Marigold my name if you'll let me," he said quietly. "I know that name will never replace Elliot in her lineage," but Lydia placed a finger to his lips. "She's already claimed you. You heard her, she calls you Papa. A piece of paper won't change that, but I'd be proud for her to have your name all the same." She kissed him then, beneath the wide open sky in a garden poised for new beginnings. For the first time in a year, Lydia felt as though she had found exactly where she and her daughter were always meant to be. Summer arrived in a burst of color across the ranch. Fields of wildflowers swayed in the breeze, and Lydia's carefully tended garden produced peas, beans, and the earliest ripening tomatoes. The ranch bustled with activity. Graham's sister Grace came to visit with her 3 lively boys, turning the homestead into a hub of play. The Turner family, formerly the ranch hands Lydia had known as Miller in passing, welcomed a new baby, and Lydia found herself sharing the leftover baby clothes Marigold had outgrown. As the wedding day approached, Harriet arrived from Montana, her polite demeanor masking obvious apprehension. She held Lydia's hands at arm's length, scanning her sister's face. "You look surprisingly well," Harriet admitted, as though half expecting to find Lydia weak or haggard. Then she glanced at the robust, giggling Marigold. "And this one has grown so much," she added with grudging admiration. Lydia's heart pounded. But she found the confidence to give Harriet a warm smile. "I'm more than well," she said. "Come see the ranch. See for yourself how we live." Graham greeted Harriet with courtesy, tipping his hat and speaking with gentle honesty about how Lydia had helped him expand the place. He explained the new spring irrigation methods, the careful breeding of cattle, and how Lydia's presence had encouraged him to carve new items like the oak cradle for the Turner's newborn. Harriet listened, still guarded but intrigued. That evening, Harriet watched as Graham read a picture book to Marigold. The baby perched on his knee. Lydia quietly leaned against the doorframe, letting her sister observe the genuine care in Graham's gaze. Harriet exhaled and turned to Lydia. "I see now what you mean," she said softly. "She does look at him like he's her father." Lydia swallowed the lump in her throat. He is her father in every way that matters. By the time the small wedding ceremony was held in the orchard, Harriet had shifted from skepticism to acceptance. She stood at Lydia's side as the local preacher recited the vows. Marigold, dressed in a tiny white frock, toddled around with a basket of wildflower petals, occasionally flinging them into the air. Lydia's chest filled with indescribable warmth as Graham slipped the ring onto her finger a second time, this time in front of everyone they cared about. After the vows, Harriet embraced both Lydia and Graham with tears in her eyes, whispering, "My reservations are gone. I can see how much you love each other. Elliot would be proud of you." As the sun set, casting gold-tinged light over the ranch, Lydia stood by Graham beneath the now thriving oak Felicity had planted. He was her husband, Marigold's father, and her partner in every challenge the land might bring. The sorrow of losing Elliot still held a quiet place in her heart, but it no longer drowned her. Instead, it had taught her the fragility of life, a reminder to seize second chances. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, a summer storm rolling in. Graham tucked Lydia under his arm, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Remember the first storm we weathered together?" he asked. Lydia smiled. "How could I forget? It led me straight to you. Hand in hand, they returned to the lights and laughter of the wedding celebration, ready to begin the next chapter on this ranch, a home grown from heartbreak, nurtured by second chances, and sealed by an unbreakable promise of love. Looking back at their journey, it's hard not to feel inspired by the way hope found its way through the snow. After enduring unimaginable challenges, our heroine and her newborn discovered not just a refuge, but a home built on compassion, faith, and healing in the heart of the Wyoming frontier. By joining forces with the rancher who saved them, they built a future that honored the memories of those lost while celebrating the blessings of new beginnings. From my own perspective, this story shows how life's hardest trials can sometimes guide us straight into the arms of the people we were meant to find. What do you think? Did the characters' triumphs and struggles resonate with your own experiences? Comment below and share your thoughts, because we'd love to hear from you and continue the discussion.